Have you ever wondered why anxiety seems to have the power to take over your mind, even when you pray, even when you try to have faith? Maybe you've ever felt that tightness in your chest, as if a silent storm was raging inside you. You smile at others, but inside you fight thoughts that won't go away, doubts that consume you, and an overwhelming feeling that something is wrong, even when everything seems to be fine. And the worst? You look at the sky, you cry out to God, but silence seems to be the only answer. But what if I told you that today you didn't get here by chance? That there is a powerful word, a spiritual truth that has the power to break this anxiety that imprisons you? Few people know this truth, and many spend their entire lives trapped in fears and anxieties that could be destroyed in an instant. But today, Jesus reveals to you something that has been kept hidden from many. A spiritual key that can completely change how you feel, transform that darkness into peace. It is no longer a theory, no longer an empty promise. It is a truth that has freed many, and today it is about to be revealed to you. But before I show you this, I need you to take a deep breath, to open your heart, because what you will hear here has the power to change your life forever. If this message has already started to touch your heart, I need you to do something now. Enjoy this video, because every time you do this, you are allowing this word of hope to reach other lives who are desperate for peace. You have no idea how many people are trapped in anxiety, sunk in darkness, and your simple attitude of enjoying could be the beginning of their liberation. And in the comments, I want you to declare with faith, Jesus is my peace. Yes, write that now. Not as just any phrase, but as a declaration of faith. As someone who refuses to be enslaved by anxiety. You are not here by chance. Do you think it was just another video that appeared? No. Jesus reveals to you that nothing is by chance. God is calling you, and He has something to give you today. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, subscribe now and activate the bell. Because here, every message is a word of life, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel this message. Don't let distraction rob you of what God wants to give you. And pay close attention. Jesus revealed something very important about this anxiety, and you need to hear it before leaving this video. What you will discover here is not just another explanation, it is a spiritual key. You are about to see how one word can transform your pain into peace, your fear into safety, and your despair into hope. Don't leave now, because what comes next could be exactly what you've been praying to find. Maybe you think that anxiety is just a matter of worry, of thoughts that don't stop. But what if I told you that anxiety is a prison that many carry without realizing it? An invisible prison that suffocates, that steals sleep, that turns peaceful days into silent torment. Have you ever felt this way? Trying to smile on the outside while your heart screams on the inside? Because now, you will discover a story that reveals something that almost no one realizes. It was a night like any other, but inside that house, the silence was a storm. Marta ran from one side to the other. Her agile hands arranged dishes, adjusted the cutlery, but her heart was in despair. The smell of food spread. Her quick footsteps echoed across the floor, while her mind was in a whirlwind. There were guests. There were conversations, but nothing seemed enough. The weight of responsibility crushed her shoulders, and each task was like a chain that held her back. And there, right in the middle of it all, was Mary, his sister, sitting at Jesus' feet, calmly, listening to every word. Marta looked at that scene, and something inside her broke. How could Maria stay there, still, while she was consumed with so many things? Every second felt like a burden. Every breath was a mix of frustration and exhaustion. She felt that no one saw her effort, no one understood her pain, and at the height of her despair, she couldn't take it anymore. He approached Jesus and said, "Lord, don't you mind that my sister leaves me to serve alone? Tell her to help me." But what she expected in response was not what she heard. Martha expected to be defended, expected Jesus to correct Mary, but instead Jesus looked directly at her, and his words echoed with a soul-piercing truth. "Martha, Martha, you are worried about many things, but only one is necessary: silence." a silence that spoke louder than any sound. Because at that moment, Marta realized that the problem wasn't Maria. It wasn't the chores. It wasn't dinner. The problem was the weight she carried inside her, an anxiety that consumed her, that made her believe that everything depended on her, that led her to get lost in the chaos while true peace was right in front of her. And how many times have you been like Marta, running from one place to another, trying to figure everything out, trying to be enough, while your soul screams for rest? How many times do you carry a weight that wasn't meant for you to carry? But Jesus reveals to you that the secret is not to do more, it is not to be more. It is understanding that true peace is not in controlling everything, but in being at his feet. Marta was so focused on doing that she forgot to be. And you? Are you losing your peace because you believe you need to control everything? Who needs? To prove his worth, that you need to be strong all the time. Because the truth is that Jesus didn't call you to carry the world on your shoulders. He calls you to rest in him. And now I ask you, are you tired? Are you suffocated by this anxiety that never goes away? If this message is speaking to you, I want you to do something now. In the comments, declare with faith, Jesus, I choose your peace. Because by writing this, you are not just commenting, you are taking a stand. You are declaring before heaven and hell that this anxiety will no longer have control of your life. And if that word touched your heart, enjoy this video. Because each like is a light that makes this message reach more people who also need peace. But that's not all, because there is something even deeper, something that almost no one noticed. And what you will discover now could completely change what you understand about anxiety and peace. But what if I told you that anxiety isn't just about what you feel now, but about what you fear will happen? Fear of the future is like a shadow that haunts you, an invisible weight that grows every day. You look ahead and everything seems uncertain, like an endless desert. But you are not the only one. There were a people who also knew despair in the face of the unknown. The people of Israel freed from Egypt but imprisoned by fear. They walked in the middle of the desert, an endless void, where the heat suffocates during the day and the cold bites at night. Every step was a mixture of hope and despair. The past was pain, the future was a promise, but the present was a constant struggle. And worst of all, hunger. Not just physical hunger, but hunger for security, hunger for certainty. Every day was uncertain, and their hearts were filled with murmurs. Is God with us? Are we starving in this desert? Voices echoed, looks crossed full of doubt. But in the midst of that emptiness, Jesus reveals to you that God has not abandoned them. Every morning, the sky opened and manna fell, like flakes of bread falling from the sky, the food they didn't plant, didn't harvest, but received like a miracle. And every dawn, the people went out to collect enough for that day. But there was a clear instruction: don't accumulate, don't save for the next day, because the manna would rot. It was as if God said, I care for you today. Tomorrow I will be here again. But even so, many tried to save, tried to guarantee tomorrow, trapped by the fear that God would not be faithful again. And what they kept rotted, like faith that weakens when it is replaced by fear. Have you ever felt this way? Trying to hold control of your future, accumulating worries, trying to predict every problem, every pain. You look ahead and everything seems like a desert, every day a battle, every choice a risk. But Jesus reveals something powerful to you. He is the bread of life. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never hunger. Do you understand this? God does not call you to live trapped in the fear of tomorrow. He calls you to trust Him today, because each day, like manna, He brings enough. But you keep trying to accumulate worries, keep harboring fears, as if God is going to fail. But God does not fail. He never failed. And I ask you, isn't your anxiety just the reflection of a heart that forgot to trust? You are afraid of the future, because you forgot that the God who has taken care of you until now will not abandon you. You look ahead and see a desert, but God already has bread for each day. And if this message is speaking to you, I want you to do something now. In the comments, declare with faith, Jesus, I trust in you. Don't just write it down. Declare it like someone who refuses to live as a prisoner of the fear of the future. And if this word is touching your heart, enjoy this video, because each like is like a light that makes this message reach more people who need this peace. But that's not all, because there is something even deeper, and what you discover now could completely change what you understand about trusting God. There is a pain that is even more cruel, a pain that is not about what you carry in your hands, nor about what you fear in the future. It is a pain that lives inside your mind, racing thoughts. Do you know this? Like a storm that never stops, voices that whisper fears, memories that you can't forget, doubts that arise like waves, one after another. You try to sleep, but your mind is a battlefield. You wake up tired, as if you had never rested. And even when you are surrounded by silence, the real noise is within you. And that's exactly how Elijah felt. A man who had seen the fire of God descend from heaven, who had faced hundreds of false prophets, but now he was running. The prophet who had been so strong was now just a tired, broken, and afraid man. He ran into the desert. His feet sank into the hot sand. The sun burned his skin. But what hurt most wasn't the desert around him. It was the desert inside him. His thoughts followed him like shadows, whispering that he was alone, that no one cared, that everything was over. And exhausted, he fell under a tree, and there he wished to die. "Enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life." This was not the same man who defied kings, who prayed and saw miracles. That was just someone overcome by the voice of anxiety, by the weight of thoughts that didn't stop. But even there, in the depths of despair, Jesus reveals to you that God has not abandoned him. An angel touched Elijah and said, "Get up and eat, for the road will be long for you." Do you understand this? God didn't condemn him. He didn't judge him because he felt weak. He didn't abandon him because he was exhausted. God fed him. And often you feel that way too, don't you? Your mind is a battlefield, thoughts that crush you. You smile at others, but inside you are in pieces. You pray, but it's as if the voices in your head are louder than any promise from God. Have you ever felt this? That even though we try to be strong, try to have faith, fear always comes back? But Jesus reveals to you that it is not the end. You are not alone. When your mind is a desert, God is the one who comes with the bread of life, who sustains you, who lifts you up. And I ask you, how long will you try to win this battle alone? How long will you pretend you're fine while your soul is at war? If this message is speaking to you, I want you to state something now in the comments. Write with faith, "Jesus, calm my mind." It's not just a comment, it's a statement of faith. Because while you continue trying to fight alone, God is already at your side, waiting for you to allow him to fight for you. And if this word is touching your heart, enjoy this video. Because each like is like a light that makes this message reach more people who also need this peace. But that's not all, because there is something even deeper. And what you discover now could completely change what you understand about winning this battle in your mind. Have you ever been surrounded by people but felt like no one could really see you? As if your pain were invisible, your smile a mask that no one can see beyond. The world is full of voices, but somehow you feel trapped in a deafening silence. In the middle of the crowd, the emptiness is even more glaring. And it is exactly in this place of suffocating loneliness that we find a man that everyone avoided, that no one dared to touch. He was a leper. Imagine that scene, the narrow, dusty streets of ancient Jerusalem, the sound of conversations, the hustle and bustle of the market. But amidst all this, there is a space around him, like an invisible circle, an area that no one dares to cross. The leper walks alone. His face is covered, his body marked by illness that is not just physical. It is a social sentence. He is unclean, untouchable, a shadow among the living. Nobody approaches. Nobody sees him as someone with a story, with a pain, just a stain, a threat, a risk. But that day, he hears about someone different, a man called Jesus, a man who is said to be holy, but who, surprisingly, does not avoid the unclean. And driven by a desperation that surpasses shame, he decides to take a chance. He approaches. It breaks all the rules, all the conventions. And before Jesus, he doesn't wear masks. Don't try to appear strong. He just falls to his knees and cries out, "If you want, you can purify me." And at that moment, the world seems to stop. The silence around is overwhelming. Everyone looks on, some with horror, others with contempt. Will Jesus walk away? Will you reprimand him? But what happens next defies all expectations. Jesus doesn't just look at him, he touches him. A touch that breaks all barriers, a touch that destroys isolation. And with a firm but compassionate voice, Jesus says, "I want it. Be clean." And in an instant, the impossible happens. The skin marked by leprosy is restored. But more than that man's heart is healed. Someone finally saw him, touched him, loved him. And maybe you ask yourself, but what about me? Who will see me? Who will touch me in my invisible pain? And I tell you, Jesus is still the same. He still sees, he still plays, he even transforms what no one else wants to see. But tell me, do you have the courage to be vulnerable before him, like that leper was? Or will you continue hiding behind the mask, pretending everything is fine while your soul screams for help? Comment now. Jesus, I want to be touched by you, if this message spoke to your heart. Or will you continue to pretend you don't need it? But what about when fear is not just a feeling, but an overwhelming certainty that you will fail? When every step feels like an imminent downfall, and every decision seems fraught with consequences you can't control. Have you ever felt this way, like you're trying to walk on a floor that crumbles beneath your feet? This is the kind of fear that paralyzes, that consumes you from within. And it was exactly in this type of fear that Pedro found himself. It was a dark night, and the wind was blowing with frightening force. The waves rose like living walls, tossing the small vessel from one side to the other. Peter and the other disciples were there, fighting the storm, each gust of wind a cruel reminder that death was near. But then, amidst the chaos, something impossible happened. A figure appeared walking on the water. Dread gripped everyone. Could it be a ghost? An omen of death? But then, a voice cut through the sound of the storm. "It's me. Don't be afraid." It was Jesus. Peter, always impulsive, full of a faith that oscillated between courage and despair, shouted, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to where you are." And the answer came clear. "Come." Pedro then got off the boat, and for a moment the impossible happened. His feet touched the waves but did not sink. He walked on the water, going to meet Jesus. But it didn't take long for fear to take over. The wind was too strong. The waves threatened to swallow him. He looked away from Jesus and looked at the chaos around him. And in that instant, his faith turned to doubt. He started to sink. Despair took over. The icy water rose up his body, dragging him down. And in one last cry, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" And at that moment, Jesus' hand held him, strong, firm, and with a voice that was both rebuke and love, Jesus said, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" The fear that seemed insurmountable was overcome not by the absence of the storm, but by the presence of Jesus. And maybe you think you would never be in that situation, that you would never dare to try to walk on water. But what if I told you that you were already living this? That every time the fear of failure paralyzes you, that every time you feel incapable, wallowing in your own doubts, you are like Peter. Is your problem the storm around you, or the fact that you are taking your eyes off Jesus? How many times have you started something full of faith, but halfway through, fear made you give up? How many times have you told yourself that you weren't good enough, that you weren't going to make it? But there is something you need to understand now. Jesus has not changed. Just as he reached out to Peter, he is reaching out to you. But do you have the courage to hold on? Or will you continue to struggle, trying to overcome the storm with your own strength? Comment now. Jesus, I hold your hand. If you are tired of wallowing in fear, or will you continue trying to walk alone? But what about when doubt is not just a thought that comes and goes, but a shadow that haunts you, that consumes you? When believing seems impossible, when trusting seems like an illusion. Have you ever felt this way? As if your faith were such a fragile thread that at any moment it could break. Maybe you've heard that doubting is a lack of faith, but is it really? Or is doubt the silent cry of a soul that desperately wants to believe? And no one embodies this struggle between faith and doubt better than Thomas, the one who many call the unbeliever, but who, in reality, was just someone sincere, someone who wasn't satisfied with stories, who wasn't easily convinced. The scene takes place in a small closed room. The doors are locked. The disciples are there, still in shock, still trying to understand what happened. They say they saw Jesus, that he is alive. But to Thomas, these words ring hollow, stories that seem too good to be true, because the pain of loss is still real. The cross is still fresh in his memory. Shattered hope still hurts. If I don't see the mark of the nails in his hands, if I don't put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I won't believe, he declares. And have you ever been to this place? The place where you need proof? Where is a promise not enough? Where words of hope seem like just pretty lies? For Thomas, it wasn't just doubt. It was pain. It was the pain of not wanting to believe in something and being disappointed again. But then, something unbelievable happens. Days later, in that same closed room, Jesus appears. But he doesn't come with judgment. He doesn't come with reproof. Instead, he looks at Thomas and, without anyone saying anything, speaks directly to the man's heart. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and place it in my side. Don't be an unbeliever, but a believer. Jesus does not reject Thomas because of his doubt. He doesn't humiliate you. On the contrary, he answers the silent cry of your heart. And at that moment, all the walls fall. Thomas no longer needs to play. He falls to his knees and declares, "My Lord and my God." But now I ask you, what if your doubt is not the end of your faith, but the beginning of something much deeper? What if Jesus is not condemning you for doubting, but inviting you to come closer? Because it is easy to believe when everything is going well, but it is in doubt that true faith is born. But do you have the courage to admit your doubts? Or do you continue to hide, pretending to have unshakable faith while inside you are broken? Comment now. Jesus, I need to see your power. If you have been struggling with doubts that no one understands, or will you continue to pretend you never questioned it? But what about when pain is not just a bitter memory, but a prison you built yourself? When does guilt become an invisible chain that stops you from moving forward? Have you ever felt this way? Trapped by the weight of something you did, something you said, a decision you made, that now seems to define you? No matter how much you try to move forward, the past continues to haunt you, to whisper that you are not worthy, that you do not deserve forgiveness, and perhaps no one knows this pain better than Pedro. Imagine that cold morning. The courtyard is dark, lit only by the light of a fire that casts flickering shadows on the stone walls. Pedro is there, mixed in the crowd, trying not to be noticed, trying to hide the fear that gnaws at his heart. Inside, Jesus is being judged, betrayed, humiliated, the man he swore to follow until his death is alone. But Pedro is trying to save himself. He had promised that he would never deny Jesus, that he would be by his side no matter what the cost. But now, pressed by fear, his heart is weak. "You were with him too," shouts a servant pointing at Pedro. His blood runs cold. The heart races. And without thinking, he lies. "I don't know him." The words come out like poison. But it's not just once. There are not two. 3 times Peter denies knowing his master. And then the rooster crows. The sound echoes through the courtyard, and at that moment, Jesus turns and looks at Peter. It's not a look of hate. It's not a look of condemnation, but of pain. A pain that Pedro would never forget. Desperate, he runs away. And as the tears stream down your face, guilt becomes a consuming shadow. Days later, even with the news of the resurrection, even knowing that Jesus is alive, Peter cannot escape that memory. Because how could he face Jesus? How could he be forgiven after having failed so miserably? He feels unworthy, like a traitor, like someone who wasted his life's greatest calling. But then, Jesus finds him on the shore of the lake around another bonfire. This time it is not the fire of fear that consumes Peter, but the fire of Christ's love. "Peter, do you love me?" Jesus asks. Not once, not two, but three. One question for each denial. And in Peter's every response, there is no more pride, no more empty promises, just a broken heart that says, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And there, Peter is not just forgiven. He is restored. Jesus does not see him as the betrayer. He sees him as the leader, as the man who would one day transform the world. But now I ask you, are you also trapped by guilt? Is there something in your past that you can't forgive? Something you think separates you from God's love? What if I told you that Jesus is still asking, "Do you love me?" That he is not defining you by your mistakes, but by your purpose. That he doesn't see you as you see yourself, because you may have failed, but his love is greater than your failure. Comment now, "Jesus, I choose your forgiveness," if that word spoke to your heart. Or will you continue carrying a guilt that Jesus has already forgiven? But what about when emptiness isn't just a passing sensation, but an invisible prison that consumes you? Have you ever felt this way? As if each day were a repetition without purpose, as if everything you did was nothing more than a shadow, a lifeless routine. Maybe you have everything the world says you need to be happy: success, status, money, and yet your heart seems to scream in the silence. It's a void that nothing fills, that nothing silences, and no one illustrates. This pain better than Gideon. It was a time of darkness for Israel. The people were oppressed, robbed, hidden in caves, fearing their enemies. And there, in the midst of fear, in the midst of insecurity, was Gideon. But not as a warrior, not as a hero. No, he was hiding in a wine press, a place where the wheat was separated from the chaff, but which had become his refuge, his hiding place. A place where he desperately tried to protect what little he had. Not just your food, but your dignity. Because every grain he harvested was an attempt to survive. Amidst the chaos, and maybe you know that feeling, living, just surviving. Working hard, fighting to keep up appearances, but inside, feeling small, feeling forgotten. And in that cramped place, surrounded by fear, Gideon saw nothing but weakness in himself. He believed he was the smallest, the most insignificant in his family, a worthless man. But it was there, in his hiding place, that the impossible happened. An angel of the Lord appeared and greeted him with words that defied everything he believed. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Can you imagine Gideon's shock? How could he, a man in hiding, a man full of fear, be called a warrior? And more than that, how could God be with him when everything around him seemed lost? And maybe you've already asked yourself the same thing. How could someone like you, with so many flaws, with so many fears, be chosen by God? How could you, who feel so small, be important to his plan? But what Gideon didn't understand, and what perhaps you don't understand either, is that God didn't see him as he saw himself. God did not see him as the man hiding in a wine press. He saw him as the leader, as the liberator he was destined to be. Because God doesn't look at who you are now. It looks at who you were created to become. And even when Gideon questioned, even when he asked for signs, even when his faith seemed weak, God didn't give up on him. Because God's calling does not depend on your strength, but on his faithfulness. And maybe that's what you need to hear today, that the emptiness you feel, this feeling of insignificance, is not the end. That what you think is your weakness may be the place where God will reveal your strength. That you are not your past, nor your fears. You are what God says you are. But do you believe that? Or will you continue hiding, trapped in fear, believing the lies that the world and your own thoughts tell you? Comment now, "Jesus, I accept my purpose," if that word spoke to your heart. Or will you continue living hidden in a wine press while God calls you a warrior? But what about when the pain is silent? So silent that no one around you can hear it. When suffering hides behind a smile, behind a routine, behind words that say, "I'm fine," while the heart screams the opposite. And the worst of all is that no one notices. Have you ever felt this way, suffering alone while the world keeps spinning? Because there are pains that are visible, that everyone notices, but there are others that are hidden in the depths of the soul, and no one knew this pain better than Anna. It was a hot afternoon in Shiloh, and the temple courtyard was filled with murmurs and prayers. People came and went, offering sacrifices, making requests, giving thanks. But in the middle of the crowd, there was a woman kneeling, her face tilted, her lips moving, but no sound came out. Anna cried, silent tears that streamed down her face, each drop carrying the weight of a pain she couldn't express in words. Because her pain was not just the absence of a child, it was the emptiness of a promise that seemed not to be fulfilled, the silence of God in the midst of her cries. Everyone around her saw only a distraught woman. Even the priest Eli, upon observing her, thought she was drunk. "How long will you continue to be drunk? Give up the wine," he said, not knowing that the wine she was carrying was not from drunkenness, but from bitterness. And how many times have you been judged while you were suffering? How many times have your silent screams been misinterpreted? Anna then stands up, wipes her eyes, and replies, "No, my lord, I am a woman in distress. I have not drunk wine or strong drink. I am pouring out my soul before the Lord." And in that instant, something changes. Not just the way Eli sees her, but the way God sees her. Because Anna wasn't just a woman crying. She was a woman who refused to give up, who turned his tears into prayer. And when the priest understands, he doesn't just change your perception, he blesses you. And with her heart still heavy, but now, with renewed hope, Anna gets up and leaves. But what no one knew was that at that moment, even before any visible sign, God had already begun to respond, and maybe you are exactly like that, crying in silence, crying out in secret, carrying a pain that no one knows. And the worst thing is when those who should support you are the ones who judge you. When you hear phrases like, "It's a lack of faith," "You're exaggerating," or "It's all in your head." But if I told you that God doesn't just know your pain, He's hearing every word you can't say, that, like Anna, her silent cry does not go unnoticed, that when no one understands you, He understands? Because what no one realized is that Anna's prayer, which seemed to be just another cry in the temple, was the seed of a promise. And it didn't take long for the impossible to happen. Hannah became the mother of Samuel, one of Israel's greatest prophets. The woman who was just a shadow in the crowd became a symbol of faith. But it all started there, in silence, in the place where no one saw, where no one heard, but where God was always. And now I ask you, have you been hiding your pain? Have you been pretending that everything is fine, while inside you are falling apart? How many tears have you shed in secret, believing that no one cared? What if I told you that your cry is not in vain, that your tears are like seeds, and that God not only sees them, but transforms each one into a response? Comment now, "Jesus, see me and hear me," if this message spoke to your heart. Or will you continue to pretend you don't need help? But what about when the chaos is not around you, but within you? When the storm is not something you see, but something you feel? A constant agitation, a restlessness that doesn't go away, a peace that always seems out of reach. Have you ever felt this way? As if every thought was a wave, as if every emotion was a wind that carries you? And no matter what you do, no matter where you go, the storm continues. Because sometimes the greatest chaos is not the one we see, but the one we carry inside us. And that is exactly what the disciples faced that night. The normally calm Sea of Galilee was now violent. The dark sky was streaked with lightning. The wind roared like a wild beast, and the waves were like living walls that threatened to swallow the small boat. The disciples, many of them experienced fishermen, were accustomed to the sea. But this storm was different. It wasn't just a question of skill, it was a fight for survival. Every drop of water that invaded the boat was a cruel reminder that they were on the brink of disaster, and in the midst of the panic, in the midst of the screams and the deafening sound of the wind, Jesus was there, but not as they expected. Not giving orders, not organizing the oars. He was sleeping. Yes, sleeping. In the midst of the chaos, while the boat rocked, while fear consumed the disciples, Jesus rested. And perhaps this is the scene that most challenges our understanding. Because how could he sleep? How could he be at peace while everything around was falling apart? Desperate, they wake him up. "Master, don't you care if we die?" The fear in their voices is clear, and perhaps you have already asked God this same question. "Lord, can't you see what I'm going through? Don't you care?" But Jesus rises. There is no panic in his eyes. There is no despair in his words. He stands up in the unstable boat, looks at the raging wind and the raging waves, and says, "Silence, calm down." And as if by magic, the wind stops. The sea becomes like a mirror. Chaos turns into calm. And then he turns to the disciples. "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" But the truth is that the problem was never the sea. The problem was never the wind. The problem was the fear they carried inside them. Because peace is not just the absence of storm. True peace is the presence of Jesus. It's knowing that even when everything around you is falling apart, he is in the boat. That he doesn't just see your pain, he has the power to soothe your pain. But do you really believe that? Have you been calling on him? Or have you been desperate trying to resolve everything on your own? Because often the problem isn't what's happening around you, but what's happening inside you. Maybe the storm that hurts you most isn't loss, failure, or rejection. Maybe it's the constant fear, the anxiety that never leaves you alone, the thoughts that don't stop. And you have been fighting alone, trying to row, trying to survive, trying to solve everything with your own strength. But what you need to understand is that Jesus is in the boat, that he still speaks to the storms, that he still calms the winds, and that often what he wants is to calm not what is around you, but what is inside you. And now I ask you, what is the storm that has taken away your peace? What is it that you carry in your heart that seems impossible to silence? What if I told you that the biggest mistake you make is trying to deal with it alone? That perhaps your faith is not tested in the absence of chaos, but in your ability to trust in the midst of it? Comment now, "Jesus, calm my storm." If this message spoke to your heart, or will you continue fighting the wind alone? But what about when you feel forgotten, even by God? When your prayers seem to echo in an endless void, and you wait, but silence is the only answer. Is God really listening? Or have you been abandoned even by the one who promised never to leave you? This is a pain that gnaws, that suffocates, that makes you wonder if heaven is closed to you. But what if I told you that even in the deepest darkness, there is a truth that almost no one understands? There was Job, a man who had everything, family, health, riches, until in the blink of an eye, it's all gone. Your children, they died. Your health, shattered. Your body, covered in painful wounds. Friends, they became accusers, saying that their suffering was their fault. And his wife, the only person left by his side, advised him to curse God and die. But what hurt Job most was not the loss of his possessions, his children, or his health. It was the silence of God. "I cry out to you, but you don't answer me." These words of Job echoed in his heart like a cry of despair. Because he knew God, he had a history of faith, but now God was silent. And maybe you've felt this too. You pray, cry, but it seems like God doesn't hear you. And silence is not just an absence of sound, it is a suffocating presence, an anguish that seems to have no end. And the most impressive thing is that, even without answers, Job did not stop crying. He didn't give up, because deep down, he knew that God's silence did not mean absence. "I know that my Redeemer lives," he declared, a phrase that seemed absurd in the midst of chaos, in the midst of emptiness, in the midst of pain. Because how could someone who lost everything still believe? How could someone who only encountered silence have hope? But the secret is here. God's silence is never a sign of contempt. It's preparation, because the same God who was silent then spoke. He not only answered Job, but restored him. He gave him double everything he had lost. But what matters most was not what Job got back. It was who he became. The silence transformed him. The silence made him stronger. The silence made him understand that God never left him, even when he didn't feel him. And perhaps you are now exactly where Job was, in a desert of silence, in a darkness that seems to have no end. But I need to ask you, is your biggest problem God's silence, or your inability to trust Him even when you don't understand? Have you already given up on crying? Do you only believe it when you see it? What if what you need is not an immediate answer, but an unshakable faith, the same faith that made Job? Declare, I know that my Redeemer lives, because even in silence, God is present. Even when you don't see it, He is working. But are you ready to continue trusting even without answers? Are you willing to believe even when everything says otherwise? Or will you continue to be a hostage to despair, letting silence destroy you? If this word spoke to you, comment now. I know that my Redeemer lives. And tell me, what do you do when God seems silent? Do you keep believing, or do you give up? But what happens when the weight of life becomes unbearable? When every day is a struggle to get up, and the sparkle you had in your eyes is now just a shadow? Have you ever felt this way? As if hope were an empty word? As if your heart were a dry land where nothing flourishes anymore? What if I told you that even God's greatest men have felt this way? That discouragement is not a sign of weakness, but of a battle you are fighting in silence? Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, knew exactly what this was. Jeremiah was not just a prophet. He was the voice of God in a corrupt land, a man chosen to speak harsh truths to a people who didn't want to hear it. But Jeremiah's mission did not bring honor or respect. On the contrary, it brought contempt, rejection, and loneliness. His own countrymen ridiculed him, rejected him, and even planned his death. He became the target of the wrath of a people who refused to hear the truth. And the prophet's pain was not just physical, but spiritual. His soul was crushed, his dreams shattered. In his heart, the flame of hope felt like an ember that was slowly going out. And then Jeremiah did what many do in their darkest moments. He vented to God. You deceived me, Lord, and I was deceived. I am ridiculed all day long. Everyone mocks me. Harsh words, aren't they? Words that many would never dare say to God. But make no mistake, Jeremiah was not blaspheming. He was crying out. Because deep discouragement is not just sadness. It's the feeling that your own faith has become a prison. It's the struggle to keep believing when everything around you seems to prove otherwise. And maybe you've already felt this. Maybe you once believed that God had a purpose for your life, but all you found were closed doors and cold hearts. Perhaps you have felt that your calling is a joke, that your faith is a burden. Perhaps you have already shouted like Jeremiah, I will no longer speak in His name, decided to give up. But there's something no one told you. It is precisely at this breaking point that the power of God reveals itself. Because even when Jeremiah wanted to give up, he discovered he couldn't. But if I say, I will not mention Him nor speak any more in His name, then His word is like a fire in my heart, a fire within me that I cannot contain. Do you understand this? What Jeremiah discovered was that God's fire is not just a warming flame. It's a force that drives you when you no longer have the strength. It is a passion that burns even in the midst of discouragement. Because the true power of God is not felt when everything is fine, but when everything seems lost, when your faith is tested, when your dreams are crushed, and still, you can't let go of God's presence. It's a fire that won't go out. A flame that burns amid tears. And even if the world despises you, even if you don't see results, even if your own soul screams in pain, the fire of God continues to burn. But I need to ask you, is your discouragement really a sign of failure? Or is God shaping you for something greater? Are you willing to let this fire consume you, transform you? Because discouragement only overcomes those who give up, but those who, even crying, even falling, continue to get up. These are the ones that the fire of God never abandons. Jeremiah did not become a failure. He became a symbol of unshakable faith, not because he never suffered, but because he never gave up. And you? Will you let discouragement destroy you? Or will you let the fire of God lift you up? If this message touched your heart, comment now. The fire of God lifts me up. And tell me, will you keep fighting? Or will you allow yourself to be consumed by pain? But what about when everything seems to lose its meaning? When you have everything the world values, but none of it fills the void inside you? What do you do when your heart becomes a dry land, even though it is surrounded by rivers of prosperity? There are pains that don't scream. They just consume in silence. And it was exactly this pain that consumed the rich young man. He was respected, admired, and had power. A young man who seemed to have the perfect life, fine clothes, a luxurious house, servants who served him. Everything was within his reach. But with each new asset acquired, with each applause he received, the emptiness grew. He smiled in public, but cried in silence. How could someone who had everything feel like they had nothing? Have you ever felt this way? Surrounded by people and achievements, but alone with an empty heart? And the more he achieved, the more he lost. Because there is no amount of gold that can fill a heart without purpose. And then, in the midst of his silent despair, he heard about Jesus. Not like any other master, but as someone who had answers that no one else could give. Someone who spoke with an authority that warmed the hearts of the humble and disconcerted the wise. And the rich young man, with his wealth and power, felt small. He ran to Jesus, knelt at his feet and asked, "Good master, what will I do to inherit eternal life?" A simple question, but one that carried the weight of a thirsty soul. Jesus looked at him, and that look was not judgmental. It was a look that saw beyond wealth, beyond the image of success. And then the answer came, "You lack one thing. Go, sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me." The young man's heart trembled. It wasn't about the money, but about what it meant to him. Security, pride, identity. Jesus didn't just want him to give up wealth. Jesus wanted him to give up the throne his pride sat on. And you? What has occupied the throne of your heart? Is it pride? Is it fear? Is it the constant need for approval? The rich young man had the chance to find the true meaning of life, but he turned his back and walked away sad, because the wealth he possessed was actually the prison that possessed him. How often does this happen to you? How many times do you seek in external things what only Jesus can fulfill? Spiritual emptiness is the silent pain that no one sees, but that consumes like fire. Do you trade time with God for distractions? Do you seek immediate pleasure to hide your pain? Have you ever noticed that the more you try to fill that void with things, the emptier you feel? Jesus doesn't want you to live a meaningless life. He doesn't want you to keep trying to fill the infinity of your heart with the finite of this world. The rich young man thought he had everything, but in the end, he realized he had nothing. Because without Jesus, all wealth is poverty, all success is empty, and all achievement is illusion. Are you ready to understand this? Or will you continue chasing the wind, holding on to things that can't save you? If this word touched your heart, comment now, "Jesus is my true treasure," and tell me, are you going to keep trying to fill your emptiness with things from this world? Or will you open your heart to the only one who can truly fulfill you? But what about when what you fear most is not God's silence, but people's silence? When rejection isn't just a possibility, it's a constant wound? It's an invisible brand, but it burns like fire. And no one understood this better than Zacchaeus, a man who had money, but no respect. He had power, but he had no peace. Because for many, he wasn't just a tax collector, he was a traitor. Someone despised, looked at with disdain. Have you ever felt this way? Judged before they could even know your heart? Carrying the weight of a label that doesn't define who you really are? Zacchaeus lived in Jericho, a busy city, full of voices that whispered his name but never in a friendly tone. His footsteps echoed in the streets, but no one welcomed him home. He was the invisible man, the untouchable, the one everyone avoided, but no one ignored, because everyone knew the sinner, but no one knew the man. Have you ever been to this place, where looks condemn you and words hurt more than swords? Where do you try to fit in but are always left aside? But something different happened that day. The city was in an uproar, the streets were crowded, and Zacchaeus knew that Jesus was passing by. But how could someone so small, in the midst of a crowd that despised him, see the master? How to reach the one who seemed so far away? Maybe you feel this way today, like someone who tries to get closer to God, but is always pushed back by the voices of your past, by guilt, by shame. But Zacchaeus did not accept being left out. He ran, climbed a fig tree. Imagine the scene: a rich, powerful man, acting like a child climbing a tree just to see Jesus, and then, in the middle of the crowd, Jesus stopped. He looked up and saw him, but he didn't just see him physically, he saw him. And what Jesus said echoed like thunder. "Zacchaeus, come down, quickly, because today I need to stay at your house." Jesus called the rejected one by name. The despised was honored. The one that no one wanted around was the one chosen to receive the Master. Do you understand the power of this? That while everyone looked at Zacchaeus with contempt, Jesus looked at him with love. That while the crowd called him a sinner, Jesus called him by name. And it wasn't just that. Jesus went further. He entered Zacchaeus' house, shared his table, and accepted him. Because where everyone sees a sinner, Jesus sees a soul that needs to be saved. But you? Do you still hide, afraid of not being accepted? Afraid that if people really got to know who you were, they would turn away? How many times have you felt invisible, rejected, even though you tried to do good? How many times have you felt dirty, unworthy of God's love? But here is the truth that Jesus reveals to you. He does not turn away from those who are rejected. He approaches. Because it's exactly where the world's rejection knocks you down that the love of Jesus lifts you up. And Zacchaeus, the one who started the day as a rejected one, ended it as a beloved son. The transformation was so profound that he declared, "I will give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have robbed anyone, I will return 4 times as much." Do you notice? It was not the fear of rejection that changed Zacchaeus. It was the unconditional love of Jesus, a love that didn't judge him, but healed him. And it is this love that is available to you today. Will you keep running away? Will you continue hiding among the leaves of your shame? Or will you let Jesus enter your home, your heart, and transform your life? If this message touched you, comment now, "Jesus, I need you," and tell me, are you still afraid of being rejected, or will you allow Jesus to show you that, for him, you have always been loved? But what happens when the burden is not on what others say about you, but on what you yourself cannot forgive? When your greatest judge is not the world, but you? It's like a shadow that haunts you, a voice that won't shut up, a constant reminder of your mistakes, your failures, what you did and should never have done. And the more you try to run away, the more this voice haunts you, the more it echoes within you. You are not worthy. You do not deserve to be forgiven. Have you ever looked in the mirror and hated yourself for what you saw? Have you ever wondered, if God can really love someone like you? It was dawn in Jerusalem, but to this woman the light seemed only to expose her shame. Dragged to the temple courtyard, thrown to the ground as if it were nothing. The looks pierced her, fingers pointed, and the voices shouted a single word that echoed like a sentence. Adulteress, a sin discovered, an error exposed, and now, before her, men with stones in their hands, ready to transform guilt into pain, shame into death. Have you ever felt this way? Accused, even when no one knows your story? Marked by something you did that seems to be the only thing people see. About you, the crowd was ready for judgment, but there, in their midst, was Jesus. And the religious leaders, eager to test the Master, challenged him. "Master, this woman was caught in adultery. In the law, Moses commands us to stone such women. And the Lord, what do you say?" It was a trap. If Jesus forgave, he would be accused of breaking the law. If he ordered her to be stoned, he would deny the mercy he preached, an impossible dilemma. But for Jesus, the truth is always stronger than manipulation. Without raising his voice, he bent down and began to write on the floor, silent words, but they weighed like mountains. And then he stood up and said, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone." Silence, a silence that crushed, that stripped the accusers of their masks. And one by one the men let their stones fall to the ground and went away. Because everyone had sinned, everyone was guilty. But there she was, alone, or almost, because in front of her was the only one who really had the power to judge her, the only one who never sinned. And what did he say? "Woman, where are your accusers? Has no one condemned you?" And she, with her eyes still full of tears, replied, "No one, Lord." And Jesus, with a voice full of grace, declared, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Do you understand what this means? That the only one who truly had the right to judge chose to forgive. That while the world holds stones, Jesus extends his hand. That while you drown in guilt, he lifts you up and says, "You are more than your mistake. You are more than your past." But you? Do you still judge yourself? Do you still see yourself as just someone unworthy, as a mistake waiting to be exposed? How many times have you condemned yourself when Jesus has already forgiven you? How many times do you carry the shame that he has already erased? The truth that Jesus reveals to you is that it is not your past that defines you, but his love for you. And you need to understand this, because while you hold on to what you've done, Jesus looks at what you can still be. But that choice is yours. Will you continue hiding behind the blame? Will you continue to see yourself as condemned? Or will you allow Jesus to be the final voice over your life? Because he didn't come to condemn you. He came to restore you. If this message spoke to your heart, comment now, "I am not my past," and tell me, are you going to continue judging yourself? Or are you going to accept that Jesus has already forgiven you? But what happens when your biggest enemy is not something you did, but the fear of the unknown? When the future becomes a constant shadow that haunts you, and every step feels like a leap in the dark? Have you ever felt this way? Stuck between the desire to move forward and the paralyzing fear of not knowing what comes next? It's as if every decision was a gamble. What if it goes wrong? What if I don't make it? What if I fail? These thoughts are not just words in your mind. They are chains that bind you, suffocate you, paralyze you. But what if I told you that there is a story that changes everything? That there is a hidden truth that turns fear into faith? Abraham was just an ordinary man, but he was called to an extraordinary journey. A divine voice sounded in his soul. "Leave your country, your kindred and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you." A clear order, but with a frightening detail. God didn't tell him where this land would be. It didn't give a map. It didn't give a fixed destination, just a vague promise, an invisible direction. And that's what scares the most, the unknown. Maybe you identify, because like Abraham, you were also called to follow a path that you cannot fully see. The difference is that while you doubt, Abraham chose to trust. But don't think it was easy. In the beginning, every step was a test, leaving the comfort, leaving the known, leaving everything behind for a promise he couldn't see. Have you ever felt this way? Like you're leaving something behind with no guarantee that you'll find something better? Like you're walking in the dark, waiting for a light that never appears. Abraham was also afraid. He also questioned. On many nights, he may have looked up at the starry sky and wondered if God was really with him. But he didn't stop, because faith is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to move forward even when trembling. And then, in the middle of nowhere, God appears again and says, "I will show you." It wasn't a map. It wasn't an explanation. It was a promise. Because for God, the path is less about place and more about trust. It was about Abraham learning that, even without knowing the destination, he could trust whoever was guiding him. Do you understand? It's not about having all the answers, but about knowing who you trust. It's not about not being afraid, but about not letting fear decide for you. And this is where the truth confronts you. You say you believe in God, but your life is full of uncertainty. You pray, but you worry. You read the Bible, but you are still afraid of the future. What if I told you that this anxiety you carry is not just a lack of faith, that it is a choice? That every time you allow yourself to be dominated by fear, you are telling God that you don't trust him? Strong, isn't it? But it's the truth, because faith is the antidote to fear. And Jesus reveals to you that you will never be alone in the unknown, because he is your guide. But you may still wonder, what if it goes wrong? What if I don't succeed? But what if you are already wrong to not trust? What if your biggest failure isn't trying and failing, but never trying because you didn't trust God? Abraham only became the father of faith because he chose to walk, even without seeing. And you? Will you continue to be paralyzed? Will you continue to doubt? Because the future will always be a mystery. But for those who trust in God, the mystery is just an adventure waiting to be revealed. If this message moved you, declare in the comments, "I choose to trust." But now I ask you, will you continue to fear the unknown? Or will you finally start to trust in the God who already knows your tomorrow? But there is something that touches deeper than the fear of the future. It is the fear of death itself. Have you ever felt that chill that runs down your spine when you think about the end? That suffocating anguish? That lump in your throat when you imagine that everything could just end? Maybe you don't like talking about it. Maybe you prefer to ignore it. But the truth is that the fear of death is like a shadow that follows you. No matter how much you try to distract yourself, at some point, it appears. And when it arrives, nothing seems enough. Not money, not friends, not the pleasures of life. Because the fear of death isn't just about the end. It's about the emptiness it promises to bring. But what if I told you there was a story that defied all of that? That there is a power that not only conquers death, but transforms it into a passage? In Bethany, a small village marked by sadness, death showed its power. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. It wasn't just a deep sleep, it wasn't a faint. It was real, cold, absolute death. Mary and Martha, her sisters, were devastated. They had sent for Jesus, believing that he would arrive in time, but he didn't arrive. Jesus' silence seemed like a sentence. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever cried out to God and had the impression that he didn't hear you? That your request was ignored? Mary and Martha clung to the memory of who Jesus was, but now, that faith felt like a cutting blade. Because how can you trust someone who doesn't arrive when you need them most? And then, Jesus finally appeared. Too late. That's what everyone thought. Martha, still struggling with the pain, went to meet him. "Lord, if you were here, my brother would not have died." Do you see the pain in these words? It wasn't just sadness. It was a mix of faith and frustration. She knew Jesus could have done something, but he didn't. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever believed that God could have freed you from something but didn't? That he had the power but did not act? That the miracle was within your reach but never came? But what Jesus said next changed everything. "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live." These words were not just a promise for the future. They were a truth for the present. And then, in front of the crowd, Jesus did the unthinkable. He went to the tomb of Lazarus, a dark cave sealed by a heavy stone. "Take away the stone," he ordered. Disbelief took over. "Sir, it already smells bad as it has been 4 days." But Jesus was not intimidated. "If you believe, you will see the glory of God." And then he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" And the impossible happened. The dead man got up. The crowd's eyes widened. Silence gave way to astonishment. What was an end became a beginning. Death, which seemed invincible, was defeated with a single word. But this isn't just ancient history. It's a revelation for you today. Because Jesus didn't change. And he is not just the one who makes us live again. He is life itself. Your fear of death, your dread of the end, they are based on a lie, that everything ends here. But Jesus reveals to you that there is something beyond, that what seems like an end is just the beginning of a new reality. But do you really believe that? Or do you live your life as if it will all end in the grave? Because the way you face death reveals how you really see God. And now I ask you, do you trust Jesus enough to overcome your fear of death? Because believing in God when everything is fine is easy. But what about when you face the unknown, the inevitable end? Is your faith just a mask to hide your fear? Or do you have the courage to believe that death is not the end, but just a passage? If this message confronted you, if it brought light to your heart, declare in the comments, "I am not afraid, because in Jesus I have life." But wait, what comes next could transform your outlook on life forever. But there is an even deeper pain. which does not reveal itself easily. It's that silent voice that whispers in your mind, "You're not good enough." A voice that echoes in every failure, in every mistake, in every comparison. Have you ever felt this way? Insecure, small, as if you would never be able to achieve what you expect of yourself, as if you were condemned to always be insufficient? Maybe you've tried to hide behind an image of confidence, a rehearsed smile, but deep down, doubt consumes you. What if I told you that even the greatest heroes of faith have felt this way? That even those God has chosen in a special way have struggled with this same insecurity? Imagine Moses. Yes, the same one that God used to free the people of Israel from Egypt. But before becoming the leader everyone knows, Moses was just a man marked by deep insecurities. He was not born into freedom. He was raised as a prince in a foreign land, but his blood was not Egyptian. I carried the weight of not fully belonging anywhere. And when he finally tried to connect with his people, he ended up becoming a fugitive, tainted by an unthinkable mistake, killing a man. Can you imagine? He tried to be a savior, but he became a killer. Fleeing into the desert, Moses found a new life, a life of oblivion, where he was just a shepherd. There, in the solitude of the mountains, perhaps he believed his purpose was over. But then, God appeared. In a burning bush, the Almighty called his name. Moses, Moses. Have you ever wondered how someone can hear God's voice and still doubt? But Moses doubted, not because he didn't believe in God, but because he didn't believe in himself. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh?" he asked. "I am heavy of mouth. I am slow to speak." In other words, I'm not good enough. Have you ever looked in the mirror and only seen weaknesses? Have you ever felt like God could use anyone else but you? Have you ever believed that your mistakes, your failures, your past were too big for anything good to come out of your life? Moses knew this feeling well, but what God told him was a truth that changes everything. "I will be with you." Moses' strength was not in his ability, his eloquence, or his confidence. I was in the presence of God, and when he finally stopped looking at himself through his fears and started seeing himself through God's promise, the impossible happened. The man who thought he was incapable faced Pharaoh, challenged the greatest empire on earth, and led an entire people to freedom. But do you know what is most impressive? Moses was not transformed into someone perfect. He still had his limitations, his struggles, his doubts. But you learned that what God says about you is stronger than any voice that echoes in your mind. And Jesus reveals this same truth to you. Today, your insecurity is not your destiny. Because it's not about what you can do, it's about what God does through you. What if you could stop listening to the voice that condemns you and start listening to the voice that calls you? What if, instead of hiding, you could stand up and be exactly who God intended you to be? But maybe you think, "But I've already made enough mistakes. I'm nobody." And that's exactly why God chooses you. Because when he uses the weak, the world sees his power. When he lifts up the insignificant, the world sees his glory. And today, he calls you, just as he called Moses. Will you continue to believe the lies that imprison you? Or will you hear the voice of the one who really knows you? If this word spoke to you, if it confronted the fear that paralyzes you, declare in the comments, "I am what God says I am." But wait, what if I told you that there's something you still don't understand about your identity? Something that can transform your life forever. There is another prison, an invisible cell that many carry every day, a prison that has no bars, but that imprisons the soul. Fear of other people's opinions. Have you ever found yourself hesitating about making a decision, worried about what others would think? Have you ever given up on your dreams because someone told you you weren't capable? Have you ever hidden who you really are to try to please everyone while stifling your own identity? You may not realize it, but this fear is an invisible chain that steals your freedom. But what if I told you that even those who were called by God have faced this same fear? That even those who were chosen for great missions had to struggle against the weight of criticism and judgment? Nehemiah knew very well what this was. He was just a cupbearer, a servant in the palace of a foreign king. In the eyes of the world, he was nobody, just someone who served wine and made sure the king wasn't poisoned. But in his heart, there was a pain. a pain that the world ignored, but that consumed him from within. Jerusalem, his city, was in ruins. The walls were destroyed, and the people were unprotected. Nehemiah could have ignored this, could have settled for the comfort of his position in the palace. But he decided to take a chance. He decided to ask the king for permission to rebuild his city walls. And do you know what happened? He was attended to. The king authorized him, gave resources, and Nehemiah left with a purpose. But what Nehemiah didn't expect was what would come next. The contempt, the mockery, the attacks. Sanballat and Tobiah, two influential leaders in the region, began to ridicule him. "What are these weak Jews doing?" they said. "If even a fox climbs these walls, they will fall." Words of contempt, of humiliation. Words that echo like arrows in the hearts of those who already feel insufficient. Nehemiah could have given up there. I might have believed it was foolish to continue, that maybe he was trying something too big. But do you know what he did? He prayed, "The God of heaven will give us success." Nehemiah did not defend himself with words. He did not try to convince his critics. He simply put his trust in God and continued to build. Have you ever stopped to think that maybe what stops you is not a lack of ability, but the fear of what others will say? That perhaps you are allowing the voice of critics to carry more weight than the voice of God? How many dreams have been buried because of nasty comments? How many times have you hidden to avoid being judged? But Jesus reveals it to you today. It's not what others say that defines you. It's what God declares about your life. Nehemiah was not a great warrior, nor a king, nor a priest. He was just a butler. But he became a builder, a leader, someone who made history, because he chose to listen to the voice of God above the voices of men. And you? How long will you allow fear of other people's opinions to dictate your choices? Have you been hiding behind a mask? Have you stopped living what God has for you out of fear of being criticized? What is more important to you, the approval of men or God's purpose? The world will always have something to say. There will always be someone ready to criticize. But the voice that really matters is the one that calls you son, that strengthens you, and that never abandons you. What if I told you that the greatest proof that you are on the right path is precisely when they start criticizing you? Because those who do nothing are not criticized, those who do not dream are not mocked. But whoever dares to live what God has planned will always face opposition. Will you continue to let the fear of others paralyze you? Or will you rise up like Nehemiah and continue to build, even when people mock you? If this word confronts you, if you know that you have allowed the fear of other people's opinions to imprison you, I challenge you. Comment here now. I choose to listen to the voice of God. Declare this in faith, because in the end, it will not be the critics who will be by your side, but the one who never abandoned you. But what if I told you that there is a silence from God that is not rejection, but a response deeper than you? Imagine what comes next could transform the way you see the silence of the sky. Have you ever noticed that sometimes silence is more deafening than any scream? That there are times when you cry, kneel, and all you get is crushing silence? It is not the silence of someone who has forgotten you. It's not the silence of someone who ignores you. It's a silence so deep that it seems to echo in every part of your soul. You pray, and nothing. You cry, and nothing. You wait, and nothing changes. It is the silence of God. And there is no greater pain than feeling that the one who has all the power seems distant, that the one who promised to never abandon you is now silent when you most need an answer. But what if I told you that this silence is not empty, that this silence has a purpose, a meaning that many have never understood? In the darkness of the Garden of Gethsemane, on a night where even the stars seemed distant, Jesus knelt, the Son of God, the one who walked on water, who healed the blind, who raised the dead, was now in agony. It wasn't just the fear of the cross. It wasn't just the physical pain that he would face. It was the weight of the entire world's sin on his shoulder. And there, alone, he prayed, "Father, if possible, let this cup pass from me, but not as I will, but as you will." A cry that split the sky, a plea filled with pain. And what did he receive in response? Silence. A silence that cut like a sword. The disciples slept. The sky did not open. There was no voice. There was no immediate comfort. Just silence. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever prayed until you no longer have strength? Have you ever waited for a response that never came? Have you ever wondered if God has forgotten you? God's silence is a pain that few understand, because you have been taught that God always responds, that he is always near. But what about when he chooses to remain silent? Does he not love you? Did you do something wrong? Jesus reveals to you today, God's silence is not absence, it is preparation. That night in Gethsemane, God was not far away. He was preparing Jesus for the greatest victory the world would ever see. Because even without an answer, Jesus chose to trust. Even without hearing a voice, he decided to surrender. And on that cross, where it seemed that silence had won, the resurrection came. God's silence was not the end. It was the beginning. But what about you? What do you do when God is silent? Do you give up? Do you rebel? Do you walk away? Or do you remain? Maybe today you are living your Gethsemane, surrounded by the silence of God, without understanding why he doesn't speak, why he doesn't respond. But what if I told you that this silence is proof that he is closer than ever, that he is molding something in you, forging your faith, preparing your heart? Many gave up in silence, walked away because they did not understand that God's silence is a response in itself. It's the invitation to trust, even when you don't feel it, even when you don't understand. Because God's silence is not contempt, it's trust. He knows you can handle it. He knows you will win. And when you least expect it, the sky will open, the answer will arrive, and you will realize that silence was not the end, but the path to something greater. And now I ask you, how long will you live as if God's silence was a rejection? How long will you doubt because you don't hear a voice? Do you really think that silence is proof that God has abandoned you? If this message touched you, if you are facing this painful silence, I challenge you, comment here now, without fear, without shame. I choose to trust even in silence. Declare this in faith, because your faith is not tested when God speaks, but when he chooses to remain silent. If you've come this far, it's because God is working in your life. It's not by chance. Every word you heard, every story that touched your heart, every silence that echoed in your soul, none of it was in vain. You are not alone. God is surrounding you, even when you don't feel it. And now, in this moment, is your time to surrender, to open your heart and allow the Holy Spirit to do a deep work in you. Take a deep breath, because we are going to pray. Close your eyes if you can. Turn off the distractions around you, because now it's between you and God. Beloved Father, I place this person in your hands now. Every tear, every hidden pain, every fear that no one knows. Lord, I ask that your Holy Spirit touches her heart deeply. May she feel your presence right now. May all weight be lifted. May all anxiety be destroyed. May the silence she faced become a testimony of faith. Let her understand that silence was not absence, but preparation. Father, I declare peace upon this life. I declare healing for this wounded soul. I declare that the power of your name, Jesus, now breaks every oppression, every guilt, every lie that the enemy has tried to plant. May she feel loved, welcomed, and restored. May she know that even when she doesn't hear your voice, you are working. May she feel strengthened, may her faith be renewed, and may from now on she no longer walk in doubt but in the certainty that the Lord is with her. Amen. And if you've made it this far, it's not by chance. God brought you to hear this message. But what you will discover in the video that is appearing on your screen now could change your life even more. Don't leave without watching, because what comes next could be what's needed for your release. If this message spoke to you, I challenge you. Comment now. I made it to the end. Let this be a sign of faith that you have received this word. And if you know someone who is experiencing God's silence, share this video, because you can be the instrument that God will use to reach that person, and subscribe to the channel. Not just so I don't miss any more messages like this, but as a way of saying, Jesus, I want to keep hearing your voice. Activate the bell, because God always has something new to reveal to you here. And I want to leave you with a powerful verse. Call to me, and I will answer and tell you great and unfathomable things that you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. You are not alone. God has much more for you. So go now to the next video and discover what God still wants to say to your heart. Don't leave without watching, because the next video could be the answer you've been waiting for.